Hi guys, I almost said good morning and then I realized I have no idea when you're watching these. But I'm just used to typically teaching in the morning, so that's my normal way to start a lecture. Today we're going to look at advocacy, and I'm going to talk a little bit about your online assignment at the end today as well. So last week we looked at and we learned about community, and so a natural extension of community as part of our microsystem would be that we would also probably advocate for some kind of cause. And in this class, it's probably related to children or families. Let me get another light on. So most likely advocating for something related to children and families. So typically when we're talking about advocate, it would be something that you would do for a cause or a proposal, but you would probably do it publicly. You could advocate privately, but it probably, if you're only advocating to a small amount of people or just to yourself, it wouldn't have the same kind of impact that we were probably looking for. So an advocate, the individual who advocates, it would be that you plead the case of another person. So maybe if you were pleading the case of somebody who was on death row, you defend a cause or you support or promote the interests of others. So for the most part, you're advocating for someone or a cause outside of yourself. It might be interesting to you or heartfelt to you because of a personal reason. But you're most likely promoting the interests of others and not yourself. That would be more kind of self-promotion. So you might be interested in this, but you're also advocating for the interests of other people. Then we have public advocacy, which is really important. It's in any action that speaks in favor of or recommends, argues for a cause, or supports or defends on behalf of others. And that's the kind of a definition that we might be using for the rest of this short PowerPoint is the idea of public advocacy and taking a stance or supporting a cause most likely related to children and families and helping and supporting them in their growth and development. So if self-interest is what's good and important for one person, then community interest is what's important and good for the group. So we're stepping outside of just the individual or ourselves, and we are wanting to have a little bit more kind of interest in our community and supporting children and families in our community for the greater good, for the group as well. So in kind of community organizing, people come together to use their collective power to make sure that community interest is met. So if your community interest is better parks or more equal elections, better education, support for older adults, then that is the community interest, and you are going to try to get other people on board with your particular advocacy cause so that you guys could use all of your powers and all of your voices in voting or writing letters or going to meetings to support, older adults or young children or public spaces or elections. So a lot of times we are looking at to provide a service. So we're giving basic service to people who need them, often to kind of meet their basic needs such as food and healthcare. So that's a typical. These are all typical areas that we might advocate in. Then self-help, people affected by a problem do something to help each other. So if you were affected by cancer or domestic violence or poverty, then you might rally around with other people in similar situations to help each other or to help other people who are going through cancer like you once did. Education, telling people about an issue so that we know and can understand the problem. And that's why that's why I kind of transitioned into doing this, is I want to be an advocate for children and their development. So letting people know in a community college setting about how important child development is and how important children are, then they can better understand it and they can better understand how important and vital good education is for young children. And then direct action. So this is the very last one down here, bringing people together to use their collective power to win improvements in people's lives and challenge maybe the pyramid of power. So when people are kind of talking about voting, a lot of times they're talking about direct action. So our collective power would be that we each have one vote, and using that for healthcare or for better roads or to build a new hospital. something like that in order to bring improvements to most people's lives. Here's an example. I think I've talked about NIAC before, which is the National Association for the Education of Young Children, which is a large federal, so all 50 states kind of private advocacy group for young children. They write a lot of books and they release a lot of information, and their public policy kind of advocate stance is very strong. They're in Washington, D.C. a lot. They're wanting to make sure that we have a lot of systems and a lot of education for young children. So they say that it starts with a personal commitment. So you commit to a cause that you are very interested in. Then you should keep informed or abreast about the biggest differences or the biggest challenges to that. Maybe in Washington, D.C., a new law might support or hinder that kind of commitment that you have to children or families. Know the process, which is really difficult, especially when we're looking at laws and the economy. It can be really hard to know how those things happen at that level. So most people specialize in one aspect of it. So you might, like I know a bit about special education law at the state level and the federal level because I worked in that area for so long. So I know that process, but I'm not super great about violence and young children. I don't know a lot about that law, restraining orders. I know a little bit, but I don't know a lot about. Express your views. I'm pretty, I try to tell you guys about how important I think children are, how important families are, why I think community is important. So I'm expressing my views. I let other people know either through my work or also in my community as well as a volunteer for the Unified School Districts. I try to let other people know about how important education is and be visible in that process as well. So here is a video from NIAC about this process as well.
Melvin, Executive Director at NAEYC. Every day, we're working to support and advocate for high-quality early learning, and we need you to raise your voice too. Here are 3 things that you can do. Number 1, build relationships. Get to know your elected officials and their positions at all levels, and partner with other advocacy groups in your community. Participate in local meetings. Follow them on social media, and invite them to visit high-quality early childhood programs so they can see early learning in action. Number 2, stay informed. Make sure you're following our early as the present movement on Facebook and Twitter, and that you're signed up for our Children's Champions newsletters and action plans. And don't forget, all politics are local, so join your local affiliate's public policy committee to stay informed and engaged. Number 3, and maybe most important, vote. We believe that all candidates at all levels can share a vision for our country in which all young children learn and thrive and reach their full potential. Make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure you actively vote. And make sure your friends and family are voting too. There are lots of other ways you can get involved, but these strategies will help ensure that
So I don't want you guys to go out and register for this or anything. This is just an example to show you how NIAC is advocating. So they send this out to people like me who have signed up for their alerts, and they tell us about some important kind of policy changes that might be happening at the federal level. And they tell us what the next steps are as well. It's very well produced. It's very slick. It's a very good form of media. But it is advocating, and its message is to promote excellence in early childhood education. And that's who they're reaching out to as well. So this is just an example of how you can use advocacy to use that kind of collective power in order to get people to vote in one particular way or another. Consensus organizing as well is just kind of knowing who your community is and getting that information out and creating partnerships. So you're going to do a little bit of this on your online activity in that you're talking about your own particular community. So I'm going to give you an example of Oceanside where everybody knows that I live because I love Oceanside. But I want you to talk specifically about your community, your neighborhood. Where are you living in your neighborhood? What are some issues that are going on as well? Because it's really important or it's a great place to start in community advocacy, is to speak from the position of your community or something that you know really well, like your neighborhood. And then you can go to a state or federal level, but most people start out and continue to always think about the people who live closest to them. So their own particular microsystem plays a lot in how you advocate as well.
In a direction together. Everybody's frustrated.
So that is Marion Wright Edelman, and she's 80 years old. She is still out there, still pretty active because she started the Children's Defense Fund, and she actually worked a lot in the government through the 80s and 90s advocating for, as she called, disadvantaged people, which included children. So she is a lawyer, and so she's recounting a story back in the day. I think this was in the 1960s and 70s when she was advocating for some increases in welfare spending and people who kind of didn't agree with her, because that is very common, and that's when we're talking about consensus. Not everybody's going to agree with you, but trying to appeal to, as she said, their common interest is really important, because if we are looking at a community level, we all live in the same area, we might see and understand the issues in that particular community, and we might want to advocate for those people as well. You can take any, this week in your kind of letter that you're going to be writing, you can write about anything you want. You can write about anything. So I'm going to give you an example for Oceanside, but you don't have to talk about children. You could talk about anything in the world that you are committed to making a change in your particular community. So it has to be your community. Earlier on in the semester, we were going to write a business letter. You were going to address it to somebody. We're not going to do that. You're only going to write 2 paragraphs. One kind of telling about the problem or the issue that you want to address, and then the second one about maybe a solution that might come about because of it. So I've taken that same assignment, but I've made it much, much smaller because we don't have that kind of lecture-based time or longer time to kind of consider it. So what we're going to do is you're just once again going to write about any community issue or problem that you are concerned about, and you are going to talk about your community, how it affects your community, and then you're going to talk about a possible solution. So it's just going to be two separate paragraphs. If I was to write about something, I might write about elections in Oceanside, because we used to be, so this is an example of Oceanside, which is my community and my neighborhood. We're a fairly large community, but we're very, very diverse, which is part of why I love it. So right here is Camp Pendleton, so we have a lot of our diversity coming from our Marines. Then we have over on this side, we've got kind of Bonsall and Fallbrook, which is a bit more rural. It goes into kind of the eastern part of our county, which is a lot more rural. And then we have kind of Vista, which is similar to Oceanside in its diversity, and then Carlsbad, which is kind of a more higher affluent area than Oceanside is. So in Oceanside, we're really lucky that we have a lot of diversity, but one of the issues that we were seeing is that our diversity was not in our mayors, our city council members, our supervisors, our clerks. Anybody who was working for Oceanside was not super diverse. It was so we wanted to see more women, we wanted to see more people of color. So one of the ways that our community decided that they were going to do that was district-wide elections. So typically before this, if you lived anywhere in this area, you could ask to be, you could vote, you could go on the ballot to be on the city council, or you could run for mayor or any of the other city positions as well. And this is the same as the school board as well. So in order to get more diversity on the school board and the city council, we've gone to district-wide elections. So if you want to represent your district or your community or your neighborhood, then you have to live in this area. So we're going to have 4 people on our city, we'll have 4 people on our city council, and each has to come from one of these different districts. And same with our school board as well. So I like this idea as looking at it from our microsystem, because this is a smaller area. This is a smaller community. So you will better know the students and children if you're going to be on the school board, and you'll better know the citizens if you actually live in the neighborhood that you are representing. So before, a lot of the people were coming from District 4 and District 1. So we didn't have anybody from District 2 or District 3. So those 1 and 4 are probably going to be thinking about their neighborhood a little bit more than they're thinking about these neighborhoods that they don't have as much contact with, that they don't know about, that they don't know where the parks are. So district-wide elections might be, we're not sure, this is a new kind of exercise in this, is that if you come from a specific community or neighborhood, you'll know that area and what we need more as well. So that would be what I'd write about. So I would write about maybe equity and how we want to see more people of color on our school board and in our city councils, and we want to see more women as well. We want to make sure that they are really representing a neighborhood and a community. And then my second paragraph might be something about how district-wide elections might be a way to make sure that we are getting people from different neighborhoods to actually live there representing those neighborhoods. So that might be something that I could write about. You could write about you want a skate park near your neighborhood because you guys don't have any, and you think that would be a great place for children to go after school. You could write about elder abuse and how maybe older people are being hurt or having their money taken away, and that's a huge problem. You want these vulnerable people to be taken care of, and your second paragraph might be about increasing funding to elder abuse or elder services in your neighborhood or community. You could talk about the roads and how poor quality the roads are and how important it is to not injure your car on potholes, or traffic around public schools is dangerous and you're afraid the children are going to be hurt, and ways that maybe you could change that. So those are all a bunch of examples that you could write about this week when you're just writing about advocating. Otherwise, I will see you guys online.